Hello, everyone. My name is Scott Malbaurn, and I am the director of the Schneider Museum of Art, part of the Oregon Center for the Arts here at Southern Oregon University. Please note that we have you all on mute, and please remain on mute until we open it up for questions at the end. I have the pleasure of introducing our special guest today, Ben Buswell, who is participating in our online exhibition titled What Needs to Be Said. This exhibition brings together the 13 artists who have received the Hallie Ford Fellowship in the Visual Arts between 2014 and 2016, an award given annually to artists living in Oregon that is based on accomplishment, depth of practice, and future potential. Buswell's sculptural work spans a diverse media encompassing ceramics, metals, resins, incised photographs, and more. He subjects these materials to physical processes, such as scratching, piercing, melting, and tearing, wherein the of accumulation, small, repetitive gestures build into a complex whole. Buswell has received his MFA from the University of Wisconsin at Madison and BFA from Oregon State University. Buswell is a Hallie Ford Fellow in the Visual Arts and a two-time recipient of the Career Opportunity Grant from the Oregon Arts Commission and the Ford Family Foundation, as well as an Individual Artist Fellowship from the Oregon Arts Commission. Solo exhibitions include Upfor Gallery in Portland, Oregon, Samuel Freeman Gallery in Los Angeles, Center on Contemporary Art in Seattle, the Art Gym at the former Marylhurst University, and Tilt Gallery in Project Space in Portland. His work has been included in the Portland Biennial of Contemporary Art and the Oregon Biennial at the Portland Art Museum. Collections include the Portland Art Museum, Portland Community College, Western Oregon University, the University of Oregon, and the Collaborative Life Sciences Building at Oregon Health and Science University. Please join me in welcoming Ben Buswell.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate being invited, and I want to say formal thank yous in a sec, but I am really excited that you and the rest of the folks with Schneider have figured out a way to kind of keep exposure to arts running while we're all not together. So thank you for that, especially.
Thank you, Ben. And how have you been faring in these COVID times?
Lucky. I've been faring as a lucky person, right? I'm very aware that I'm a teacher. A couple of my students are here, so hi to you folks. We figured out a way to teach drawing online. I'm not doing sculpture now, but I haven't lost my job. I think that's the point, right? Is like I'm being conscious of how lucky I am. And that's getting me through the days, I think.
Great. Well, Ben, I've made you a co-host. So if there is anything you'd like to share with us on the screen for your images, you can do that at your convenience.
Okay. Well, if you don't mind, I'll just launch in. That sounds good.
Well, as you prep that a little bit, I was going to say to the end, I'll mention to our audiences now is that, you've been selected to be one of the participating artists of a new initiative that we will launch later this spring, which is a Ashland citywide outdoor exhibition that will be called Art Beyond. And we will be working with partnering with sites from Mount Ashland to Lithia Park, Science Works, Eastern Ashland, and Ben has agreed to be participating artist in a group exhibition that will take place at the top of Mount Ashland. So be on the lookout of information coming in the near future regarding that. And it looks like
that's super exciting. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that, figuring that one out. I figured it out. It's not going to be the best case scenario, but we got it a little better than normal. So thanks for bearing with me there. Formal thank yous to Scott and all the folks at the Schneider for doing this, and also the Oregon Center for the Arts at Southern Oregon. I'm still not entirely sure what the Oregon Center for the Arts totally encompasses.
Let me tell you.
Okay.
That encompasses theater, music, in creative arts, and the creative arts program is emerging media, digital arts, fine art, and creative writing.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really cool.
To
get all of that together on the same page. That's really nice. So thank you for that, and the other sponsors, and especially Hallie Ford Foundation for all they've done for me and other artists in Oregon, and Diana Nawi for curating the original show, and Tyler Nolan for making a really cool introductory video, which I had no idea was going to happen. It was very nice.
She's one of our student employees. The Schneider Museum's a teaching museum.
I was a little jealous of the word usage. I feel like I've lost my words since COVID started.
She's great.
All right. I'm going to do an artist talk a little bit different today because I know there's a mixed crowd. There's students and other faculty and other patrons and things. So I'm going to break my work up into approaches, objects, and then most of you might know that a lot of the stuff that I do is based in manipulating photography, right? And not in a Photoshop kind of way, but in a physical way. So there's a few different ways I do that, and they do slightly different things. So we're going to talk about those groups. But through all of it, I think there's some things that remain true. And one is that what I'm really concerned with is what's kind of at the core of everything is this idea of identity and memory, and identity as connected to self and also connected to community, right? Like social communities, all of this, like where does my identity come from? Like how do I know who I am? Okay. I do a lot of experimenting. I feel like for me, living is experimenting. I may feel like I've done something before, but I haven't done it that way, meaning I haven't done it at that time in that context, having done it before, right? So with the right kind of attitude, everything is experimental. And touch to me is like an analogy and a metaphor, right? If I touch a material, what I'm saying is that I'm trying to touch an idea or touch someone else in a way, right? Physicality in my work is the way you get to meaning. Surfaces like water, we'll see this. Water is a big feature of the work that I make. Complex surfaces like water, we fall in love, for example, with like the way water looks, the way waves look. But that's really like a very, very thin film. And it's not even a film, it's just the outer edge of a hole, right? Like we might think about the ripples on the surface because they're pretty, but those ripples are no different than all of the water underneath, thousands of feet deep, except for the fact that that's the part of the chunk that hits the other material, right? And I'm like fascinated by that idea. And in that way, like thinking about surface and body and the body of the water and the surface of the water and the skin and the body, right? It's because to me, landscape, for both its social construct, which we'll talk about, but also its physical construct is, to me, a metaphor or an analog for human bodies, for human people, for identity. And what you'll notice is, what you'll hopefully notice is that the image, right? Whether it's an image or an object, how much it's an image, how much it's an object, and how the subject matter and the material and the process play together is where the kind of like meaning and content of the work comes from. Quick facts, I'm from Oregon. I was born in Dallas, Oregon, 1974, 3 months before Nixon got on the helicopter and left. I went to school for architecture, and then I went to the University of the Real World for a few years, and then I went back to school for art. I think my architectural schooling influences a lot of what I think, because that little bit of schooling taught me that spaces are political and that spaces are, things are a part of us, right? I experiment a lot. Like if I had my druthers, I should probably throw away a lot more, but I can't help but keep it. I'll just take little bits of there's like lots of different ways to print photographs. Well, I need to know how those work. I need to know what happens when I cut them, how they heat. I'll scratch at them. It's this kind of like picking, right? It's like a scientist always diving in and wanting to crack it open another level. I feel like that's how I approach things. I'll take images like on the top left, pull out the subject, flip the background, just keep iterating them, playing with them, stick photos in the cracks of a piece of wood, right? For me, experimentation is a really important thing. Yeah, deeply probing, right? Like, because to me, I want the emotion or the thought that I'm driving at in the work to be reflected in the way that the material is handled, right? And so I need to know what that feels like as I do it. So I'm going to talk about objects first. I started off in sculpture, came from architecture, started off in sculpture. And I think sometimes like the combination of subject and object and image and material and all that is easiest to get at through the sculptural object. So this is a piece called Lion's Gates that I made in 2012. And the top are ceramic busts. They're actually matching busts. And on them is carved a geometric or a geodesic surface, right? That geodesic surface, like Buckminster Fuller's tensegrity spheres or geodesic domes, right? That's a really modernist kind of idea. It's an image that we associate with a certain period in time. And then those are sitting on a Rococo base, or like a late Renaissance style base, a Baroque base, that are then supported on classically proportioned pedestals. So there's like these three phases of art history in these objects. And you can see that I've taken like a drill and just essentially punched through and eroded the bottom of the pedestal. And so the whole, I'm kind of over explaining this piece because I want you to get the whole picture. It's the Lion's Gate is this thing that sits out in front of a place that wants to project this sense of power, right? Modernism, the Baroque, like high classical art, like these are all times in art history and human culture where people thought they had the answer, where they had it figured out, where they were very confident, and they had these like universal truths, right? So here, I'm eroding that, right? Like the direct action here is to undermine the idea of that universality, of that universal truth, of the idea that you can know. Right. And so for me, it's that combination of the image, the surfaces on the image, the time periods of the image, like all of that research, plus the way I've handled the materials that kind of brings the whole thing together. Right. It's there's an architectural term. More using architecture, I'm going to pronounce it wrong. It's called I can't do it. It's German. Gesamtkunstwerk. It means like the total artwork, right? Where Frank Lloyd Wright would like design the napkin rings at the house and the dress that the woman wore for the party, right? It's this thing. And I have a tendency to kind of do that too, right? Everything matters. This is a piece called Memory is Forgetting. I think one of the things about identity that we do is we say, well, I'm not a bagel person, right? I'm not a so-and-so, or I'm a fried egg kind of person, right? We define ourselves through things that seem permanent. And part of that is our kind of like understanding of memory, or the long held understanding of memory that's like a file cabinet, that like we have this thing and it's a thing that we can pull out. In neuroscience, and we all kind of understand now over the past few years, that memory is actually an act, right? To remember something is an act of a network that's never the same. It depends on how you remember, who you're remembering it with, past context, present context. And so this idea, I wanted to make this image, I wanted again to undermine that sense of knowing, that sense of knowledge, by making an image of an LP and then presenting it in a way that makes it unique, right? That makes it so that it is the only version of that can exist, but it's also irretrievable. Like you couldn't put it on a record player. So this is a 30-inch diameter porcelain record that I pounded out and made circular and then grooved out, right? And this is the kind of stuff, I'll explain this, it's gonna make me sound weird, I guess, but while I'm, cutting that record, I'm meditating on things, not in a professional meditation sense, but like as I work, I'm making sure that my mind is in the place of imbuing this object with a certain thought, right? The viewer will never get that. There's no record player that could play that. But for me, it's important that I enter the space of the object as I make it, right? I think about the ethics of objects too. And so now I'm going to kind of bring in a little bit of that social construct, right? I go between, in my work, I go between like more specifically social things and the bigger kind of philosophical questions about identity and epistemology and all this stuff. And I go between the two because I think for me, in my life, the philosophical stuff influences the way I react towards things in real life, right? But then again, the things in real life go back and reflect on my philosophical or ethical underpinnings. This is called a Sooner urn. My maternal grandfather's father was an Oklahoma Sooner, which is the land grab that happened that took a lot of land away from a lot of indigenous folks back in the day. He was also like a racist, right? He wasn't a KKK member. He didn't do anything overtly, but he used the N-word and said those people a lot and like things like that. And I grew up with this and there was never any malice. But I remember my mom saying things like, Dad, like, don't say that around the kids. So he died a while back. And my mom had this toy that he had, and the toy was actually a dancing minstrel. And I don't know if you've ever seen these, but they're these kind of like loose jointed dolls that you slap on a board on your knee and they dance, right? It's a super racist thing, right? It's like something that degrades another culture for your own enjoyment, right? I asked her for it because like I felt it was important for me to deal with my own relationship with that and to like find a way to accept the fact that I come from a family with people who use the N-word, right? So a friend of mine threw this big urn for me. I mean, it's not that big, it's about 1.5 feet tall. He threw this urn for me and I placed that toy, that minstrel toy, into the urn. And then I meditated on it, right? Like I thought about my grandfather, I thought about these things. And the whole time I was doing that, I marked the surface of the clay, right? So this time spent texturizing this thing is kind of like, for me, a marker of the time I spent kind of coming to terms with the fact that like, he is part of me and I am part of him and it's part of our family, but it doesn't mean it defines me. And then the whole piece was covered with glaze, and I don't know if you can see how thick it is on here, and then fired, right? So the thing is emoliated, and the glaze is so thick that it seals the object and kind of seals it away. So in a way, it's almost like it's an entombment, right? And I can see the chat going off. I have trouble following the chat and the other things at the same time. So if you do have a question or want to make a comment, please just interrupt me. Feel free to do that.
I think what we could do then is I could read questions from the chat at the end. We could revisit those questions and then open up for questions at the end.
Okay. All right. Yeah, if that works better for sure. This is a piece that I made. And this is an object that starts to, this is a piece I made, of course. This is an object that starts to get at that idea of image and object and materiality, right? So this is a cast of a piece of driftwood from Pacific City, Oregon, where I spent a lot of time as a kid. I took a rubber mold of it and I made a cast of it. The cast is actually paint. So it's an object made of the thing of images, right? Which is, you can kind of think of like, I don't know, maybe a good analogy would be like like trying to manifest thoughts, like if your thoughts are images and somehow making those real. It's that kind of idea, right? There's a falsity to images. Like if we go back in our understanding of sculpture and painting, right, and the argument between them from back in the Renaissance, sculpture is real. Like you can hug it, you can touch it, you can lift it, it can crush you, it can do all these things. And paintings or images are simulacra, right? They are, no matter how naturalistic, they're not real in a way, okay? I love that argument. I love all that stuff. So this is an object that's meant to get in between there. And then embedded into that are family photographs. Are they my family photographs? No, it turns out you can buy a person's life on eBay for about $30. It's really weird. You can buy lots of photographs, and you can cull through them and watch people's grandkids grow, and it's kind of crazy. I was very careful to not have any faces in here, but I didn't need them, because every time we see this kind of photo, every time we see this, we know exactly what's there, right? It's the concretion. I mean, this is like a log covered with barnacles. That's the idea, but those barnacles that make the log and shape the log and change the log are the things of the family, right? And I think another last thing to point out about this log is that the paint color is the median color of all of the photographs. So it's a mixture of all the tones and values, right? So there's this kind of explicit relationship between the image making of the log and the images that are presented in the photograph. The Fred Meyer scanner is really good for doing these kinds of things. Oh, double slide. Oh no, I zoomed. I think this is about the last object piece that I have to talk about. This is called When the Cathedrals Were White. And this again is an object that is more specifically social. Le Corbusier, who's a really famous modernist architect, was also an incredible racist, and really believed that the march of time would kind of like clear the world of losers, meaning people that weren't like him. And he wrote this book called When the Cathedrals Were White. And in that book, it talks about how to redesign modern cities to be perfect and to like cure society's ills and all this stuff. And along with that, there's sentences that say something to the effect of like the black and the brown and the underprivileged can be lost to the history of time if they can't keep up, right? And that's like pretty hardcore stuff for someone who's touted for all of his architectural prowess, right? Like that's crappy. So instead of grand designs, instead of big statements, I made a tent. I made a place with a mattress and a little light that you can go in and you can be by yourself and look at the drawing. The inside of this tent is actually a cross contour drawing of water that's then cut through, and you're going to see this process in just a sec. And then heated. The paper it's on is called Yupo. It's a plastic paper that was developed for watercolor. But if you cut it and heat it, because it's a plastic, all those little cuts will open up and bloom. And then that light will be able to project through and makes this almost kind of like cloud-like form on the wall, right? So I think what I'm trying to do in this piece is a reversal of Corbusier, right? He's saying when the cathedrals were white, everything was perfect. And what I really like, more to the point, is Lawrence Ferlinghetti's last line of one of his poems that said, "Nor any altars in the sky except fountains of imagination," right? There's this kind of like play between the individual and the collective, and like the smallness yet kind of vastness that an individual can inhabit their own life with, relative to the largeness that other people take up when they're actually very small-minded. You know what I mean? My students can attest. I say, you know what I mean, a lot. So I'm sorry if it bothers them. This is the first, if you know anything about my work, you know that I embellish photographs. This is the first one, right? This was one piece in a show that I had at Raid Projects in Southern California, in LA, and then it came back and was part of the 2012 Portland Biennial. Originally, and still underneath all of this photo work is this idea that I'm trying to attack the image. I'm trying to undermine symbolic reading of things. I love writing and I love words and I love reading. But as an artist, like if I had to pick my team, right? If it was down to brass tacks and we were gonna fight about it, I would say that like, I don't trust language, right? I don't think a lot of writers do either, but images, symbols are processed through language, right? Naked man, naked lady, apple, snake. We go A plus B plus C plus D equals something, right? I want to get past that. I want to get to a place with the viewer where we are experiencing the same thing. Whether or not that thing is as expansive as a grand narrative or a Hieronymus Bosch painting where you can see all the details and like have all these stories, I don't care. I'd rather have one moment of closeness, one moment of shared experience than 1,000 where we can get confused with each other, right? So the photos, the scratching of the photos, the getting between the emulsion layer where the image lives and the backing paper that supports it, right? That is a direct attack. That can be read as like a direct attack on the photographic image because photographs are the ubiquitous conveyor of symbolic meaning in our world, right? But what I discovered in doing it is that it lifts the emulsion, right? It lifts the emulsion and actually creates an experience when you move past them with the light that I'll show you in just a second that I wanted to continue to explore. I think this piece and this piece really get to the heart of what water is and what the photographs do, right? This is a smaller piece, but it combines an image of skin and an image of water, right? The skin is the surface of the water. The body is the ocean, right? And I think this one too, this is a picture of me when I was 9 years old, 1982. I was 8 years old at Pacific City, Oregon, up on the dune. And hopefully what you can see in this piece is that I've tried to continue cutting the photograph along the planes and the shapes that are behind me in the landscape, right? So I don't know if you know what a cross contour drawing is, but it's where the line work follows the surface of the forms, like kind of my fingers following over my hand. And that's essentially the way these images are cut. They're cut in the perspective cross contour of the stuff that's depicted in the photographs. And in this way, what I'm trying to do is actually like remove myself from the landscape. So when you see this and you turn the photograph in a certain way and all the light catches all those little scratches and those little picked up pieces of emulsion, my image is interrupted and distorted, right? I'm trying to like subsume myself into the landscape to say that like, I am not me without that place, okay? I think you can see what's happening here, right? See all the light along the bottom of this? That light, that shimmer will move up and down the photograph as you move around it. And so what happens is, I don't know if you can see my hands, but there's the emulsion, it sits on the backing paper, and with this tool I've made, I can, it's not really a scratch, it's a cut, but the cut lifts the emulsion like this, so that every one of those cuts has a little reflector on it, right? And so the image is literally picked up off its background in these little tiny ways. And as you move around, the light reflects now back at you in a different way. So the looking at these becomes very active. And I think that's what I mean by creating an experience for the viewer that's embedded in the ideas I want to talk about, like water, surface, body, all that stuff, but that on its face is a direct experience, because that is the thing that's the most honest I can be, right? Me hugging you is more honest because you can feel in a hug whether a person, you can feel it, right? Like you can feel if it's meaningful, you can feel if it means something else is going to happen, you can feel if there's something about that tactility that makes the thing feel more true than saying like, I love you. Like people can lie, right? A hug never lies. At least that's the premise I hope is true. Oh, sorry, I keep hitting Zoom. It's funny because I'm the type of artist who doesn't tend to do the same thing over and over and over. You can see that, like, I know a lot of media. I treat images like they're materials. I can weld, I can do ceramics, I can make stuff look like stuff in clay, I can make stuff look like stuff with charcoal. Like, it's because I think it's that curiosity and experimentation. But there's something about this embellishment of the photographs and the way it works for me that I can't get tired of. The other important thing to think about these photographs is that the water too is from a place that's meaningful to me. So there's a whole, I'll show you in a little bit, there's a whole suite. Most of them come from the Columbia River. And a lot of them, and I guess the rest of them come from different places in the Pacific. This one's from Hawaii. It's outside of the town Lahaina. Lahaina is a place that like did a lot of sugarcane trade. So there's this kind of like colonialism, right, wrapped up in that, as well as in the images of the Columbia. The French, Spanish, the English, the Dutch, like everyone fought over our area of the world up here because they believed the Columbia was the Northwest Passage. Right. So that body of water as a political, social thing underlies all of these images, right? Because my body is a political, social thing. It's also an emotional thing, as are all of these things that we talk about. We argue about history because we don't want to feel bad about history. You know, we want our team to win. We want to feel right. Like the more powerful someone is, the more they state that history has always made it so that they are in power. You know what I mean? Victors write the history books. And so I think the way we describe our identity, our levels of denial, the way we tell our own story according to what we're avoiding or what we're dealing with or accepting is really an interesting analogy for the way that like culture in general tells stories about our history. And these allow me to spend time with those places. Again, like my processes are a lot about just spending time with things and allowing my mind to deal with it. I'm not saying it's therapeutic, but it's not therapeutic, right? There are different ways I work with the photographs and they do different things. This one is more about a disruption than it is that kind of like experience. It's about kind of creating a texture over the image that makes it hard to rectify what the image is, right? And even though there's like, it's delicate and there's tiny marks and there's this and that, between the different ways that I work the photographs, you can kind of read the idea of aggressiveness or how much I'm trying to like push the viewer back from the image, right? There's times when I want to talk about the falsity of that image a little bit more, but also like pay homage to the fact that we want to believe it. So here we've got a bunch of that reflective work happening in most of the image, but wherever there is the foam, it's left completely alone. And what happens is all of a sudden that foam like pops out, almost like it becomes more sculptural on the face of the photograph. And I love that, like, playing with perception kind of like, you know, it ties directly into the way that we start to dismantle our expectations about the photograph. And hopefully if I've done my job with the rest of the exhibition or an artist statement or something, people are realizing that that's an analog for dismantling expectations about the self or society, blah, 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 right? You can tell I get, there's like wheels within wheels. You know, I love that phrase. Sometimes I play with the photographs and actually create deep frames. I do a lot of artist-made framing. Deep frames where I'm bending and shaping the photographs inside of the frame, right? So not only is there a reflected quality, but then the image has its own presence. And I picked this one to show you of them because this one I also made this decision to leave this this really dark area where the photo was so underexposed. In that area, there was literally no information. And then it gives it almost like this kind of like sad ghost eye look, right? There's a figurative element to it. And I love that because this piece, unlike these few before, is much more direct about the idea that the body is included in this, right? So I love to move back and forth between, am I pushing towards the social part? Am I pushing towards the body part? Am I pushing, you know, towards the identity? Or I think like these pieces, am I leaving it completely right in the middle? I mean, that's the thing is I feel like these works live in this middle ground that is everything all at once. But it also means that they're the most difficult to read with a specific intent. So as an artist, I'm always trying to figure out how and where I'm talking and how loudly I'm talking. And usually I solve those issues inside of exhibitions by having works that speak on different levels, kind of talking to each other. I want to show you two pieces where I think this worked the best. This is a piece that is now at the OHSU Collaborative Life Sciences building in Portland. It's about 20 feet long. These photographs are about, say about 4 by 5 feet. They're 40 by 60. So 3.5 by 5 feet. The surfaces of them are embellished, the entire surfaces, right? So they all reflect. And one of the best things that happened, this was an early piece, 2014, 15. When the show opened, about an hour into the show opening, there was a group of about 12 to 15 people, including kids, sitting in front of this like they were sitting in front of a lake. And they sat there for a good long while and talked and relaxed. And I thought like, I couldn't have predicted that. Like, you know, maybe my ego wanted like smart art critics standing there and going, blah, 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 blah. But what I got was something I couldn't have predicted and something that I didn't even know I wanted. Like they went to the lake, they sat there and they did their thing. And it was incredible. Like I thought that was the first time I'd really thought that like I had made that thing happen where the viewer and I were having the same experience with the work. Like I saw it happen and it was amazing. This second one, I'm going to include a couple process shots for the students of us. The second one was for the show at the art gym, and I printed this photograph. You can see it's done in 4 sections on a photographic emulsion paper called Duratrans that's a little bit like the U-Potes. It's a plastic. So again, if you cut it and heat it, it will bend. And this is Michelle, and this is Daniel. And they helped me, but we cut it in the studio. And what happened is that we cut that cross contour cutting on all the open places of water. And like the other image, left the foam untouched. And as we went along, the reason we did this in situ at the art gym is because it would have been, this won't roll, right? So we did all the cutting at the studio, brought it in and made it into sculpture in situ. And the wonderful part is, I didn't know what it was going to look like. Like you can't control that. It's up to the cuts. So it's this kind of great reveal. And there's the table that it was cut on. And I think we're going to run out of time, but I can show you why it's a different color. There's Petra and Michelle continuing to heat. And then here's its iteration, right? So this is another, is that manipulation of the photographic surface creating like a space for the viewer to inhabit. I'm going to kind of quickly go through these horizons. Horizons are a way that I work with photographs, and it's essentially a much more aggressive way to get at the space of a photograph, right? Perspective in a flat image is fake. So what I'm doing here is essentially stripping back the emulsion layer off the photograph and using the pictorial language of difference in value to create a new horizon. And I'll just kind of move through. Some are a little more physical. And then this is kind of the culmination of those horizons, called Horizon Mother. And again, bringing in the idea of skin and breast and images of water to create that kind of really punching that idea that this is about us. This is about the body. This is about nature. This is about the world. And people could not stop touching that thing. They would come along and like play with the danglies. This is a piece, Closed Mouth and Open Mouth Columbia. This goes back to the Columbia. This is a photograph of Juan de Hecita's, or Bruno de Hecita's map of the Columbia River. He couldn't cross the bars of Hecita Head, right, in Central Oregon coast. So he drew the map as a bay. And this was like right before the English took control. I was thinking about colonialism, and when I saw that map, I thought that looks really like, it reminds me of a clan hood, or at least reminds me of Guston's clan hoods. And I wanted to kind of get at that idea and make that statement about the Columbia and its connection to colonialism. And so I cut that shape out, stripped it away from the backing paper. So this is all just the emulsion of the photograph, and then built these frames and filled the frames with gesso, right? Gesso and some other little things to help it stiffen up. And then it varied on each of these. Like this one I picked up sooner and hung on the wall, and this one I let sit a little longer, but that gesso would just pull it open, right? And so there's this kind of obliteration or whitewashing of the history, right? But then the weight of that history, the weight of that whitewashing, maybe you want to call it guilt, is pulling the photograph open. I'm going to go through this real quick. This is from Celilo Falls. Just talk about modularity, because it's important for the piece with the Schneider. These frames are 1 foot wide. There are 20 of them. Celilo Falls used to be a major place, a really, really important place for the native tribes, the indigenous tribes here in Northern Oregon and South Washington. And in the late 40s, it was covered up by the Dalles Dam. I went and researched the maps, and on the topo maps, I found 20 feet was the most shallow bit of water between the top of the old rocks and the surface of the lake, right? So this number, this is the depth of the lake, right? This is the depth between our present and their history. And then the image is from the surface of Celilo Lake. Okay. And so again, it's me. I think about this a lot too. Like, I'm white. I am from Oregon, so I feel like I have a right to talk about Oregon. I am connected here. I love the land. I'm a West Coast person. Like, I love the West Coast of America, like all this, like, but I do think about like, I don't have the right to use feathers in that way, right? I don't have a right to use tribal imagery, right? But I do think, as an Oregonian, as someone who cares and thinks about these things, it's important for me to figure out how to talk about them, right? And so for me, that's a lot of like figuring out how to spend time with it and how to engage other people, no matter how subtly, into that conversation. So in our last couple of minutes before questions, I'll just show a few images of what is at the Schneider or is in part of the online exhibition. The bulk of the piece, this part, was originally shown at my last show at Upfor, called The Story Is Not the Story. And it's 1776, right? 76 repeating images of obsidian from the Newberry National Monument that are hand embellished. The obsidian is cracked. And I wanted, again, for the for the students especially to see the production process. Like sometimes as an artist, you've got to go into production mode. There's the framing, there's the trimming station and the framing station and the packing station and the hanging station and the gluing station. I love it when the studio gets like this. It feels so good. Another installation shot. So these images of the obsidian, which is a natural glass, which over time cracks and heaves in its natural way, thousands of years, right, from water and cold, was paired with these two glass flags. And these flags are made from glass frit, which is glass, in this case, powder. And then an American flag was embossed, pushed into that powder, and then the powder was fired. The magic of the material here, and this gets me really excited, is that glass wants to be, this glass wants to be 6 millimeters thick when it's fully vitrified. So if it's thicker than that, it'll flow out and get thin. And if it's thinner, it'll ball up till it's 6 millimeters thick. We froze this at like just past what's called the tack fuse phase. So it didn't allow to do either of those, but you can see it has started to rip itself apart, trying to find that 6 millimeter equilibrium. And so for me, this is a perfect metaphor. There's millions of grains in there who are trying to come together, trying to fuse into vitrified glass, but in the process, like ripping themselves apart. And that when that material and metaphor hit like that, it makes me incredibly, incredibly happy. But now, those flags are represented in a more personal, or sorry, the obsidian is represented in a more personal way. And that is paired with, I'm going to skip the video, paired with casts of obsidian stones that I embellished. So what I did was I took casts of 2 head-sized chunks of obsidian, and then anywhere where it's glassy and smooth, I left it. And then I carved, defined the surface of, and put the hand mark into the wax of the other parts. So I spent time with these stones, and the installation instructions, Scott, I don't even remember the exact wording, but it's something like, think of someone you love and I can't remember the exact words now, I feel bad, and place the stones in a relationship like that, right? So each time they get installed, they're a little bit different. And each time their preparators come up and been like, that is the most fun I've ever had. I was thinking of my mother, or I was thinking of this. So it's trying to take that natural thing and imbue it with a sense of us and all those things. But I'm running over time, so I want to stop and give you a chance to ask questions.
Sure, thank you, Ben. If anybody has questions at home, you may unmute yourself to ask that question, or type it in the chat. I see a question going into the chat now, and I could read that aloud. When you started that sculpture, the log piece with photos is more real, in quotes, because it has more of the nature of an object. You can pick them up. They can crush you. They are individual photographs, are usually reproducible and mostly 2D. Do you believe that your photographs become sculpture once you start to torture the surface, read the heated Dura trans piece, or is this a distinction not worth making?
I think so. It's Stanley. I think, Stanley, that's absolutely the point, right? Is that there's a place where, in my experience of making the photograph, that it transforms into another thing. It's why I haven't got sick of doing that embellishment yet, because when I move across it, like, it's still a photograph, still a photograph, still a photograph. And there's this moment where I put the last marks on, and when you pick it up, it's different. Like, it's a different thing. Now, we could like have academic arguments about, well, it still doesn't have mass and it doesn't have volume, and that to me is not a distinction worth making. To me, it's about the experience of it being not an image anymore. But yes, that's exactly what I'm getting at, is they become, if not sculpture, they become something that's not an image, right? I don't know what chiseling, not napping means, Molly.
It looks like you use the textured chisel to form the obsidian rather than knapping it.
Oh, yes. You mean here?
Yeah.
Yes. No, I understand what you're saying now. Yeah. So I took a mold, like with the log, I took a mold of the chunks of obsidian, and this is actually Victory Brown sculpture wax that's used in the lost wax casting process. So I took a 2-part mold, brushed the wax in, welded the 2 halves together in the wax, sculpted them, cut them apart, cast them, welded them back together, and then patinaed them. So these are cast bronze rocks. Sorry if I didn't make that clear.
We have a question from Maria in the chat. How old did you start your art journey? What do you have to say for artists who are not interested in more classic fine art or galleries, but more so things such as design for stories or books or characters, but not interested in computer design, if that makes sense?
It totally makes sense. Well, I started my art journey, in grade school. I was one of those precocious kids that always got their work done really soon, so I got to draw a lot of pictures while I was waiting for the rest of class. But then I gave it up because I was going to be an architect, right? I took hand drafting all through high school. I can draw like a really straight line with a lead holder. But I didn't start art until I was 24, 26, when I went back to school in late 1998. And I think the thing about that is that I had a lot of like lived experience by then, but I didn't have a lot of knowledge, right? Like I hadn't studied art history. And I think so. I don't know. It's hard for me to talk about illustration and things like that because it's not my world. I know that my friends who do it kind of have a different, like their outlets are so different from mine. I don't know how you get into that, right? I know that like, if you prefer working with one media over another media, then I think personally it's good to get training in all the skills, because sometimes ideas come across better in another way. For me, medium is the meaning, right? I don't know if I'm really answering your question, but I think for me, a lot of where I ended up had to do with the faculty I was in contact with, who I talked to, finding resources.
We have time for 1 or 2 more. Would you mind to stop sharing your screen? We'll get a better picture of you. There's a question from Doug in the chat. I assume all those images are digitally printed with ink, but it seems that some are emulsions that would be light sensitive, analog prints that enable you to melt or combine materials. Can you clarify? Also, the Cellulo images were so insightful to me. Great idea to parallel history, physical topography.
First, Doug, thank you. I love that piece a lot. All the photos are emulsion prints. They're the thing that we traditionally call C prints. So there's a place in town called Infinity Images that still has a Lambda printer. I've tried doing this type of light catching stuff, and obviously the peeling wouldn't work with an inkjet print, but none of it works with inkjet because there's just a different relationship between the image and the backing and the paper, right? It goes in even with Hahnemühle, where it sits on the top a little bit.
Oh, cool.
So these are all emulsion Lambda prints. They are digital, but they're emulsion paper. Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Another question from Stanley in the chat. Did you start your journey as a straight photographer? And if so, can you talk about what made you abandon the constrictions of that practice?
Yeah, no, I think the reason that I abandoned it is because I never did it. I started off, I actually drawing, printmaking, moved to sculpture. I teach sculpture. It was all about making objects that, my dad he taught metal shop. So I knew how to do that stuff. And my grandpa was a woodworker. So for me, going to photography was really a lot of thinking and reading about images and objects, about the physical and the cognitive, right? About the brain and the body and all that stuff, and trying to find ways to get at those ideas. And photography was it. Like the media of it, its meaning and culture, its ability to reproduce reality, all of that stuff just made it the media that I needed. And I don't consider myself a photographer. I wouldn't pretend that I know how to make a silver or palladium print, because I don't. I know how to photograph enough to get what I need it to do, right? But I think I do use my own images because I think there's something important in having that personal connection to them, which is maybe a weird thing. But
thank you, Ben. And last question from the chat. It's a very long question. Where do you teach?
Oh, I teach at Portland Community College, Rock Creek campus. So right now we're not a campus, but the Rock Creek is the one out on the west side as you head out to the coast.
With that, Ben, we're going to hit the 1:30 mark, which many of our students will be starting class. So thank you so much for your time today and sharing your work. Look forward to working with you in the very near future.
Yes.
Outdoor exhibition coming up this spring.
Yes, thank you very much. And hey, Eric Para, thanks for showing up, buddy. And Ben, and all of you.